being overconfident? Am I becoming complacent about complacency?
I think you are.
Oh, he's not the Messiah. He's just a very naughty boy.
Yeah, I've got big ears.
Brian just wanted to see anyone now. Piss off.
That's the one. Because you literally complete me, and we complete each other.
You've obviously encountered discrimination in your own life by virtue of being Australian.
Hey, Manuel Camp was a real pissant. It was very rarely stable.
I don't want to get too gushy, but I might just be saying you complete me, Dean. P&G now stands for Pritchard and Good.
Branding is not a bad blind date.
Look at you! You are insane!
How did I do that?
You're
How
insane!
did I do that?
You're insane!
Well, hello from the Ministry of Funny Walks. I am your host today. I am Joseph Jaffe. I am dressed to impress because I have a VIP in the virtual studio. And let me tell you, this is the first official second appearance on Corona TV for my guest. More about him shortly. I want to tell you something. Why am I dressed up? Why am I wearing a jacket? Why do I even own a jacket? Well, I actually gave a corporate show today, a private engagement before the show, and about 90 minutes, got off about 20 minutes ago, and I'm going straight into this one. So I don't know how it's going to play out, but all I know is this show brought to you by Nespresso. Thank God for Nespresso, because I chugged that coffee down as quick as I could. It was the only way to make sure that I had the energy, because, the camera, this whole streaming environment tends to take or suck life out of you. You've got to be a little bit more dramatic. You've got to be a little bit more animated. And so hopefully that is what I'm doing today. But let's get into the show. Right? Today is National Dress Up Your Dog, Cat, Horse, Guinea Pig, Goat, Pig, Fish, Pet Day. It's National Dress Up Your Pet Day. So do me a favor, send in any photos of your pets dressed up, and I'll put them on the show tomorrow or maybe even next week as well. How about that? Bob Farnham says, who's up for coffee? I am down for coffee, never mind up for coffee. And Stephen Rubin is waiting and now watching. Well, Stephen, you're in for a great show today. I promise you we will not let you down. Tomorrow, though, just a quick reminder, Josh Burnoff, Groundswell, Trisha Ben, C-Suite Network, Jeff Cottrell, Converse, Starbucks, Wesley Faulkner, so much, Wesley Faulkner, ran for City Council, just all around, still teaching me about how the mind should work. And Moshe Engelberg, The Amare Factor, another amazing community show tomorrow, where not only each of my guests will have 5 minutes. I even bought an egg timer. This is the only way I can keep them to 5 minutes. Not only will they have 5 minutes each to talk about whatever is on their mind, but I'll also show you the Corona bites from Monday through Thursday's guests. So you will see the highlight today, for example, from my interview with Martin Lindstrom, the author of The Ministry of Common Sense. And let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about Mr. Martin Lindstrom is this man has only preached common sense. Common sense, maybe, it's so funny that he's getting back to common sense, because his thought leadership is at a level that transcends sense, if that makes any sense. But you will see the highlight from today's show. Let's see who else is up there at the moment. Chip Griffin says, last month, can you see the effect of espresso on me? Last month, I decided that since the quarantine thing is still a reality, it was time to upgrade to a proper espresso machine. I hope it was today's non-sponsor, Nespresso. And Tom Morris says, I've actually taken a walk with an Oxford Don who did walks 6 and 8 as he tried, oh, no way, to remember the name of a colleague. The chap who walks so funny, the Ministry of Common, the Ministry of Funny Walks and Common Sense. And Shauna says, loving your lives 100%. All right, so let's keep moving. Birthdays. Who's celebrating a birthday out there? Mr. Bill Hanf, Cindy Gordon, Dr. Natalie Petterhoff, and also on LinkedIn as well. A bunch of people who are my friends on LinkedIn and Facebook. Fancy that. A B2B and a B2C friend. Isn't that strange that you can actually be friends with someone both personally and professionally? Jason Holland, Scott Chabot I think he's still in Alabama. Happy birthday to you. Well, we're going to get into our soliloquy, and the soliloquy is called Common Sense is Not That Common. And you know what I thought would be nice to do in terms of paying homage to my guest today is a little bit of a book reading. So it's book reading time. And today it's page 99 from Life After the 30-Second Spot, which, and this is important, was published 16 years ago. 4 monkeys were put into a room. In the center of this room was a tall pole with a bunch of bananas at the top. One by one, each monkey climbed to the top of the pole, and as it got within arm's reach of the bananas, it was doused with a burst of cold water from an overhead shower, which made the monkey give up on the meal and scurry down the pole. After this had happened to each monkey several times, they all threw in the towel. One by one, each of the original 4 monkeys was replaced with a different monkey. As expected, a new monkey would start up the pole in search of the prized bananas. But it would be pulled down by the pole by the remaining monkeys who had experienced the drenching firsthand. Soon, all the new monkeys got the message: don't go up the pole. By the end, there were 4 monkeys in a room who were afraid to climb the pole, although not one of them had ever been sprayed with cold water. Put differently, you had a bunch of monkeys all afraid to do anything, to take a risk, but none of them knew why. Does that sound familiar from a professional standpoint? 16 years later, Martin Lindstrom publishes The Ministry of Common Sense, to which I say, hallelujah. So much of business today is essentially monkey business. Legacy principles and practices that are passed down from old fire to new hire without being questioned, without being rethought, without being completely rewritten. Is it any wonder so many companies today are built to suck? I will never forget the words I heard from a Unilever recruiter back in my senior year at college. Marketing is common sense, but how many of us have common sense? Perhaps he should have said, how many companies have a ministry of common sense? A CCSO, Chief Common Sense Officer, of course. Business as usual is just not going to cut it in this new normal we find ourselves in. Hell, it wasn't good enough pre-COVID, so why do we think it's going to hold up post-COVID? It's time to turn to our Prime Minister of Common Sense to show the way. It's time for Martin Lindstrom. He is the author of several New York Times best-selling books that have sold millions of copies and have been translated into 60 languages. Recognized as one of the world's most influential people by Time magazine, and in 2020, he was named the number 20 management thinker in the world. So you can never have a bio that does justice to Martin Lindstrom. Instead, I think video is always a little bit better.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our opening keynote speaker, Martin Lindstrom.
Brand innovation, product innovation cannot just stop with a beautiful package design. Every component a brand is sending, every signal it sends, any interaction you have with a brand is a brand. We have completely forgotten about the customer. Companies are seeing the world from inside out rather than from outside in. We're looking at people through a one-way mirror. You need to interact with people, engage with them, and feel what they're feeling. never get bored anymore. And boredom is a pause in our life where we have time to reflect, to see things from a holistic point of view. And boredom is the foundation for creativity because it gives us the pause to think and reflect and create new thoughts. How many of you feel completely overwhelmed with data, information, and emails, and you just can't keep up with all that stuff? Raise your hand. We don't see things anymore. We don't observe details in our life anymore. It's almost like we are trying to survive through this mess of information overload. 85% of everything we do every day is irrational. We infused empathy into the mindset of the employees. The better you are at creating a sense of empathy between people in an organization, the better they're able to work together. If I take you back to a research study conducted on chickens of everything, they were stuck into a cage for half a year. And after half a year, the gates were open to the beautiful green grass. They went out, and what do you think happened? They went straight back in again after 1 minute. That's the chicken cage syndrome. And all of you right now is sitting in a cage. Compliant people, that's what we are. We're compliant people because we do not dare to challenge norms. Because we're afraid of the unknown. We're afraid of the consequences. Let's go back to the process of creation. I basically learned that if you take two ordinary things and combine them in a completely new way, you have innovation. Brands are right now dying. The concept of global brands will probably not exist in the format we know today 10 years from now. If you do not change when you go through COVID-19 and create a profound new business model, you did not get the message. Your role is to challenge things. Start by challenging yourself first.
Welcome back, Mr. Martin Lindstrom.
Thank you so much. It is an honor to be back on your amazing show, I have to say. And do you know what? This is the first time I'm actually going to talk about my new book in public. There we go. It's on your show.
I am honestly honored, and I feel like I'm part of the movement. As I said, it began 16 years ago when I thought to myself, wait a second, you know, that seed, you know, 16 years later, you've been able to codify it and write. But we'll get to the book in a second. Here's what I love about you. First of all, you were guest number 75 on the show, and we're up to 188.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. Now you get to see how I've evolved and how my show has changed, and I get to also to see how you've evolved and you've changed. For example, you had a different sizzle reel all the way back when, and it's amazing that you don't just go back to the same old, that you're constantly updating and innovating and changing it up.
Well, I think as we talked about the last time, the idea is very simple. We need to take our own medicine sometime. And in this case, it's all to do with innovation, right? I'm selling innovation and I'm taking my own innovation pill. So we have transformed enormously over this year. And in fact, the book, I rewrote the entire book during this crisis. And even though it's very uncomfortable, I don't believe you are evolving unless you feel uncomfortable. If you feel safe, you didn't get the message, in my opinion, right?
So how does one actually get themselves into an uncomfortable position? Because you're right, it's almost like a visceral, it's almost like the state of being, which is I don't feel like this is business as usual right now. How do you get the message and then act on that message. Because, you know, the old saying, there are none as blind as those who will not see.
Yeah. Well, I think the number one point you should work with is to project yourself from outside in rather than inside out. So if I take one of our clients, it's Maersk. It's the largest shipping company in the world. They sit on 21% of all trade. One of the challenges they had was that they were stuck in a very conventional industry. They invented the concept of container shipping. Can you imagine? So when I said to them, hey, you guys really need to evolve, they felt they were evolving. There's just one little problem. And I'm going to introduce a new word for you, which you probably never heard about before. The word is rolling. Rolling means if you are sending your container to somewhere and it's stocked in the harbor and is not going on board on the container ship and someone else is getting on board, typically because they are paying a higher fee for getting it away. Now, that's an industry standard. And in fact, between 30 and 40% of all containers every week are supposedly rolled. So I said to the guys at Maersk, this is crazy. And they said to us, well, no, not really. We are 5 or 6% better than anyone else on the rolling issue. I said, well, who would send a container with flowers from Colombia and they will be dead when they're standing at the port? So I couldn't really, well, they got it, but they didn't really get it. So here's what we did. This is the important thing. I said to them, who do you aspire to? And they said, well, we really like Amazon. We really like Uber. I said, fine, let's do an experiment now. Imagine that Uber is bought by Maersk. And listen to this way I'm phrasing it. I didn't say Uber is buying Maersk. I said Maersk is buying Uber. Imagine that's happening. And what happened immediately for these guys were they started to see how ridiculous it was. Imagine this. You're jumping into a car and halfway through the ride, you're kicked out of the car because someone else on the street want to pay 20% more. So you take a little bit of a ride for a mile or two and then a third person is kicking you off. Well, that's the concept of rolling. And as soon as they saw it through that lens, and we had workshops across the world with thousands and thousands of people, we even created internal animations so they could simulate how ridiculous it was, then the penny dropped. And what happened was they actually got rid of the concept of rolling as the first in the industry. And immediately it really made them succeed. I wouldn't take the credit for this, but I'll say that over the last year alone, the share price has tripled because, among others, of this new mindset. So when you ask me the question about change, do this experiment for yourself. Who do you look up to, which is outside your space of competition, and then have those people buying you? Simulate that. What would they do different? And what would you mess up if you bought them? This is giving you a pretty good indication of how you have to change.
Right. And that nuance is so important. What would you mess up? It's a fantastic way to think about it, because ultimately it is the enemy and the tyranny of incrementalism and being able to say, but that's the way it's always been done. That's the one part. And the other part is, you know, and I know this is not the correct political term, but in context, it's what's known as the tallest midget, you know, which is, well, we're better than the rest. But you know what? Relative to whom? When you change that frame of reference, you are absolutely insignificant. And that whole thing can be rethunk and rethought, right?
Absolutely. I mean, this is what's explaining why one industry after another has been killed by Apple or by Amazon. I mean, they saw the writing on the wall. I'll tell you a funny story. I was actually in a city called Espoo in Finland. And the very day the first iPhone was invented and released. Now, that's the headquarters of Nokia. And It was fancy. It was like a space shuttle. You went in there. And I remember I spoke to the CEO back then, and I did a video interview for Ad Age. And I remember he said on the call, he said something like, when I asked him, what do you think about the iPhone? It comes out today. And he said, I couldn't care less. It's not going to affect us. Now, I went down to the reception and went out on the street, and a guy from the PR department rushed out, got hold of the tape. You're using tapes back then, right? And so it was kind of, that tape, I would have loved to have it today, but they really couldn't care less. And the rest is history. They did not simulate an outside-in point of view. They were good enough. They saw the world from inside out.
So I have a few comments that just came in as you were talking. David Libby says, CCSO, the Chief Common Sense Officer, is his dream job. Tom Morris says, profoundly
Get a job with me. Please, we need more.
There you go, David. Send in the resume. Tom Morris says, profoundly wise video intro. Shauna says, what a great topic. And Steve says, Martin creatively hung the Roy Lichtenstein Good Morning, Darling Prince sideways on his wall, unconventional. So there you go. Martin, one of the things that I did, and I don't think I was doing this when you were on the show, was I started this thing called Fun Facts. And the thing about Fun Facts are, it's amazing what you learn about someone that you might not have known. Maybe sometimes you might learn this in a two truths and a lie icebreaker. And you sent in 3 things. And I looked at the fact that you participated in Morgan Spurlock's movie, The Greatest Movie Ever Sold, or that you've been twice on Tyra Banks' America's Next Top Model. But it was the 3rd thing that you sent that I was like, nope, this is the one. This is so Martin Lindstrom because of your, I guess, Danish heritage, that you slept in a Lego bed for 2 years as a kid. And according to this image, you still sleep in a Lego bed. That's living the brand, right?
I love the photo. Thank you for building that for me. Well, listen, it's true. I'll tell you a fun story. I actually don't think I've told anyone this story. When I was a kid, Lego did not have green bricks. Can you believe it? Green was not launched. I'm telling you a crazy story. No one will believe me, but it's actually true. You see, green bricks supposedly was out of production. They couldn't get the raw materials for it. And there was also studies showing in Sweden that if you were eating 1 or 2 kilos of Lego bricks and they were green, there was a bigger danger that you actually would die than if you were eating white bricks. No, don't get me started on that one. That's common sense, right? So no one had a green brick in the world. And I was the first kid to get the very first green brick coming out of the factory. So I was a huge, huge fan of Lego. And I built my own Lego bed in my mom and dad's house and slept in it for 2 years. And I'll tell you one thing. I would certainly not recommend anyone to do this. Because every morning I woke up, I had dots on the entire back, sleeping in this stupid Lego bed. But it was cool.
Collateral damage, not collateral damage, collateral damage. Wow, that, I mean, that is a story that, exclusive breaking news on Corona TV. But Martin, we are here today to talk about this exciting book, right? The Ministry of Common Sense, how to eliminate bureaucratic red tape, bad excuses, and corporate bullshit. There's unfortunately some red tape on there, so I wasn't able to complete the word. But I think we have a very good idea what that word is. Before we get into the subject, you said something, and I was looking through the materials and really going to school and learning. And it really, really struck me, Martin, and connected with me. You said this. You said books change lives. And then you told a very personal story about your late mother. And I wonder if you would be so kind as to share that story and talk about the profound impact and the ability of the written word and of thought leadership in general and action to change the world for the better.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that story up. No, very few people have actually heard the story. It actually began with my mom being a heavy smoker. She smoked, I remember it, she smoked 30 to 40 cigarettes every day. And she always told me that she smoked very small cigarettes. It's not a very big cigarette. I don't know how it worked, but that's in her mind. So what happened was that I wanted to make her quit smoking. And I used a lot of time on figuring out how I could make her quit smoking. And everything I did really failed. And that was where I decided to understand the psychology of smoking. So I raised $7 million, and we conducted the largest neuroscience study ever conducted in the world, by the way, in 6 countries. 2,087 people's brains were scanned using fMRI. And one of the things I wanted to find out was, if you can persuade people to do something, can you de-persuade people to do something? Can advertising have the reverse effect? kind of. So we actually took all these smokers of Marlboro and Camel into these scanners, among others, in Oxford. And what we learned was three things, was really profound. The first thing we learned was that the health warnings on the cigarette packs, so the one saying general surgeon's health warning, right? They actually have the reverse effect. They actually encourage smokers to smoke more. What I don't need to tell you was a really provocative finding from our study, particularly because everyone believes that there's a warning on a pack, it will make you quit smoking. Now, that insight was so big that we teamed up with the government in Australia, we teamed up with the governments in Canada, then we worked with the government in the US and in Europe. And as a result of that, the cigarette packs actually changed the design. So we managed to anonymize the cigarette packs without any logos, without any graphics. And today, if you come to Europe, you will notice there is zero logo recognition on the packs. They're basically just white. Now, I've been told that more than 30 million people have since then, in fact, survived because they were not starting to smoke, mainly due to this particular unusual discovery. But what also I tend to say here is that sadly my mom didn't survive. She died of cancer a couple of years ago. And I know she said to me on the last days that she was so proud of that another 29 million people, 999,000, actually survived her. Because she was very proud of being a guinea pig for actually giving her life to everyone else. So this is something I wrote about in my book, Biology, B-U-Y-ology, and it was the first book in the world about neuromarketing. And it really, for me, was also a piece of evidence that when you write books, they change their lives. And in this case, it changes the life of more than 30 million people.
I completely agree. And, I, on a personal level as well, my mom is watching. She used to also be a smoker and growing up. And what I would do is I would take her cigarettes and I would break them in half. And then I would put them back in the pack and leave them at the bathroom door when she was in the bathroom. And she would come out and shout and scream and swear. But it was the only way that I could get the message to her. So it's a connection, and it really connected with me. But this was the point, right? The point is that books change lives, and you believe that this book in particular is one of the. I mean, I read it and I was like, wow! That you said this is the most profound book you've ever written, and almost as I would say a preamble to common sense. You wrote this piece called The Ultimate Excuse on LinkedIn. And not only did you write it, but, you spoke about, I call it the Excuse Hall of Fame, but this idea that you said COVID-19 is the ultimate excuse, or has been used in an excuse. So I wonder if you could tell us that story, a little bit more about the article and how this became this grounding, this preemptive momentum for the book.
Well, listen, it actually began when I was jumping on a plane the other day, heading for my home. And as I was sitting in my seat, this announcement went on in the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on board on this plane. I regret to inform you that all cabin service has been completely suspended on the entire flight. And by the way, the lavatories in the front of the plane has been closed and are now only reserved for the cabin crew. You can, however, use the lavatory in the very back of the plane. So here I was sitting with 131 passengers. There was 32 rows in the plane. I was at row 2, and I had to walk down the entire aisle, passing by every person on the way in slow motion, because there was a long line in the back of the plane. And here you could infuse this beautiful, freshly brewed smell of toilet mixed up with a beautiful faint flavor of coronavirus. Now, where did common sense go? I don't need to tell you. And not only that, so I'm sitting on this plane and they have this idea of doing contact tracing, which is wonderful. It's just another form you have to fill out as a souvenir as you're about to land a new place. And the first question on this form was, have you been in any close proximity with anyone over the last 12 hours. Now, the only thing I had to do was just to look at the person next to me, which I didn't know.
Anyway.
Right. And then the second question was, this is crazy. No one has a pen anyway, on a plane in it today, right? I mean, people have their iPhones and whatever. So this brilliant person, he gets an idea. Why don't I borrow a pen from the stewardess? And that's at row 1. So this pen is now walking through the entire plane, right? And it ends up with me. And I'm looking at the second question. And the second question is, have you touched anything anyone else had touched over the last 12 hours? And then I tick that box as well. Where did common sense go? Now, what I'm saying here is we live in a world now where, of course, Corona and COVID-19 is extraordinarily serious. We all know that. We need to wear masks. This is a given. But Corona and COVID-19 is now used as a blanket excuse on top of anything you don't want to do, whatever that is, like the menu card I got the other day at a restaurant, which is now reduced. And I wanted to have egg Benedict. And she said to me, we don't have that anymore. I said, so what do you have? She said, we have scrambled eggs. I said, why don't you have egg Benedict? She said to me, well, because it has COVID. There's a COVID risk. I said, what's the difference between egg Benedict, which is an egg boiled, versus a fried egg? What? And so it becomes this endless excuse we're having, just another layer of red tape, bureaucracy, and BS, right? In the end of the day.
I have one, by the way, that my pet peeve in terms of common sense is, the amount of times, for example, let's just say I'm late to catch a plane. For those people that don't know what a plane is, in the last moment, and I have to get something quickly, and there's a long line, and I quickly run up to the counter and I go, would it be possible just to be able to serve me, because I'm really late to catch a plane? And they go, but if we let you in, then we have to let everyone else in. And then my response is, but everyone else isn't asking to be let in right now, and everyone else doesn't have a plane to catch. And it seems like people get so set in their ways and the way things have always been done that they actually lose the ability just to question the most basic, dumbest rule. And so we almost lower the bar, and we collectively drag ourselves or get dragged down to be the lowest common denominator instead of the highest.
I tried it the other day. I agree with you. I suddenly realized that all my bank accounts were closed. And I'm not sure if you can imagine that feeling. You try to log in and it says rejection, and you go into another account, they're all closed. So I called this call center, and I enjoyed this beautiful new modern music. I think it was the greatest hits of the latest elevator music from 1800. And while waiting there, it reassured me that this was a very important call, and I was very important for them. And by the way, they would record this for quality assurance purposes.
Yes.
And so I would tick away on those keyboards there, and basically every question you can imagine is what they will ask, because they want to drag this on as much as you can. So after 39 minutes, I went through and I said to her, what's wrong? She said, you are overdraft with $2.11. I said, where? She said, well, you have a bank account. I can see that you haven't used it for 6 years. Are you aware if you have a bank account? I had no idea, because you have many bank accounts, right? So I said, no. And it has a reoccurring fee every year. And that was just going over the borderline. So now it's down with $2.11. And then she said, then we decided to close all your bank accounts. I said, why? But that's a rule. We can't give everyone discount or move around money without your permission. So I said, your best solution is just to close down all my accounts for another 7 days. And this is the essence. The essence is, if I saw this from the outside in, that's what we talked about with Maersk. I look at it from a consumer, a customer point of view. No one would do this. But when we sit inside in the middle of all this stuff, as I said on the video, we are chicken cages. We're sitting in here looking from inside out. It makes sense. Why does it make sense? It makes sense because I have been drinking of the Kool-Aid. This is how we always did it. Don't question it. Compliance will never agree to your change, all these different excuses, and slowly I become compliant. And do you know what happens? We slowly are drifting away from the customers and become more obsessed with ourselves than actually what the customers want.
And I'll give you one more script that needs to be rewritten. Is like, please note that our menu has recently changed when you make the phone call. And I'm like, why is that even relevant? Why do you honestly believe that I called yesterday and I was like, wait, I have to press 2 instead of 3? And you know, how many times have we gone through these death knell, whatever they call it, IVR systems, where, and I look at my phone, I'm like, I've been now on this phone call for 1 minute and 35 seconds, and I still have not spoken to a human being. But it's exactly the point that you made. And so I created this for you, you know, a nice little meme generator. If you could go ahead and write a book about common sense, that'd be terrific. Okay. I mean, Office Space was the movie written for your book, or your book was written for Office Space. This is why you say that ultimately there is a business pandemic going on. Common sense is a business pandemic.
Yeah, it is a business pandemic, because let's just try to nail down what is common sense. For me, common sense is seeing things as they are and doing things as they ought to be done. Or if I should say it in another way, it is to treat customers and consumers and employees as they themselves would expect to be treated. And this is super important, because here's what I discovered as I began writing the book. There's a very strong correlation between common sense and empathy. And I do know a lot of people are thinking about crying babies and cupcakes when I say empathy in a corporate sense. But remember this, empathy is the ability to put yourself in the shoes of your customers. And let me try to explain that with a very interesting story. So one of our clients is a very large pharma company, wonderful people, been around forever, and they're one of the leaders in the respiratory field. Now, I said to them when we began working together, when did you last talk to one of your patients? And they said, never. We never. So I said, why? Compliance will not allow us to do it. So I said, BS. So I went to compliance. They were really nice people. They said, absolutely, we've never been asked. So I persuaded them to bring these executives with me into homes of patients. And here we are. I'm landing in a home of a 28-year-old lady. She has asthma. She had it her whole life. And I asked her one of these very sensitive questions. I said to her, listen, how did it feel like to have asthma as a child? And she started to cry. And I said, try to explain what you're thinking. She said, listen, when I was a kid, I was in school. I'll be frank with you. I was a loser. I was an outsider. When there was a party going on, I was never invited. They thought I was disgrace for human mankind. They told me. So I was really hurt by it. And I said to her, listen, you seem to have a lot of confidence right now. What has made it change? She said, I'll tell you the secret. And she went into her bag. She had a handbag, and she pulled out a straw like this. And she said, listen, I give this to my friends. Whenever I meet new people, instead of me trying to explain this and that, I give them a straw. And I ask them to hold themselves for the nose and breathe through the straw. And after 1 minute, I have exchanged empathy. They know how I feel. And that's the reason why I recovered. So here's what I did. I stole the idea. And I set up a meeting with the board, with the senior management. And then I said to them, let's switch off the lights. And we did that. I had the sound of heavy breathing running in the background like this. And then everyone had to put a straw in their mouth and start to breathe. And after 30 seconds, one guy, he spits out the straw. He said, this is ridiculous. Why should we do this? No one will do this. And I said to him, you're wrong. This is how your patients feel like every minute of every day of their life. It was almost like you could hear a penny drop in this organization. From that on, they completely changed. This huge company suddenly were employing people differently with empathy. They were doing research and development differently, having the patient in the mind. They were even doing healthcare professional interactions differently because now they knew how the patients were feeling. What happened was empathy came back. And what the bonus was from all this was that the Ministry of Common Sense suddenly kicked in, because suddenly common sense became part of the vocabulary as well, which is really difficult in a compliant industry like healthcare. But they managed to do it because suddenly they're seeing the world from a customer's point of view or a patient's point of view rather than their own point of view, right?
Now, I don't know if I had this in place when you were on the show the first time, but now I have a quote associated with every episode. And this is your quote, Martin. Common sense is the most widely shared commodity in the world, for every man is convinced that he is well supplied with it. So note that little bit of sarcasm in there.
It is. I mean, seriously, it reminds me about Benjamin Franklin. He once said, common sense is something that everyone needs, few have, and none think they lack. And you have to remember, common sense is all about common. It is to see the world from multiple points of view. But here's what's happening, and this is the reason why I'm saying that common sense and empathy in this case is in an existential crisis. Because here's the issue. We now know from all sorts of studies that the degree of empathy has dropped dramatically over the last decade. A study done by University of Michigan shows among 30,000 students that in fact the levels of empathy dropped some 48% over 20 years of this experiment.
Wow.
28%. The reason why the study, among others, showed was, one, because of social media. Here we are obsessed with our self-fulfilling little bubble, which is reaffirming my point of view, but really do not take into account other people's point of view. That's the reason why we sadly right now are seeing the very concept of democracy falling apart, because I don't care about what this guy thinks or what this girl thinks. I care about myself. The second thing which is happening right now is that everything is headline grabbing. It's 280 characters on Twitter. There's no way you can explain emotions with that. When we're sitting on Zoom or on Teams or whatever, it's just to the point. Numbers today are showing that productivity is going through the roof, but there's no reflections, there's no emotions, there's no creativity because we don't have time for it. We can't put it into a timesheet. And the third thing is what's so fascinating. And the third thing is an experiment done with mothers and with babies. And I have a nagging feeling of, Joseph, that you actually have that video, because that video shows why empathy, among others, is falling apart. And do you want to play this? Is it on roll right now?
I do want to play it. It is about 2 minutes and 45 seconds of your time that you will want to invest in this. And one of the ironies as well is this is maybe the one exception to the norm where you don't need even one character to be able to drive home this point, let alone 140 or 280. So yeah, let's roll that.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, come on, why aren't we doing this? Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
It's a very frightening study, I had to tell you, because what we learned from our research study over the last decade I've worked on this particular book is that there's a direct correlation between Botox and lack of empathy. So the more Botox you take, the less micro movements you have and the less you connect with people around yourself. In fact, right now, as the world is watching that little video we have of ourselves on Zoom all the time, we know today that as people are watching themselves for 8 or 10 hours every day, the number of plastic surgeries in the US has increased with nearly 300%. So what I'm saying here is that empathy is in an existential crisis. And with that comes common sense. Remember, they're very linked, those two things. And in the corporate space, it's really not that different. Think about it. We're operating in silos all the time. Increasingly, my KPIs are one drawing the show. And even worse, what happens on top of this is that we're now stuck behind the screen. So we can't even run culture anymore. It's collapsing in front of our eyes. So what I'm screaming for with this book, and that's a reason why I'm such a obsessed person with common sense at the moment, is if we do not get this back again, we're lost. And it comes back to and Joseph, I want to tell you this because it's so important for everyone to know. It comes back to the human evolution. What we learned as we started to study how people have been evolving over the last hundreds and thousands of years is the number one reason we as human beings are where we are today comes down to the fact that our brain evolved into the cerebral cortex. And that is the area which is containing empathy. No other mammals on planet Earth have that. That is what made us survive, because we had the ability to put ourselves in the shoes of a polar bear and kind of imagine what that polar bear will do. That is what made us survive. For the first time ever in what we see from science is we're now losing that brain side. It literally is shrinking and taking away the ability to handle empathy, because the surroundings we now are affected by is basically just deteriorating it every minute of our life.
I love how, we could be saying, don't be dumb. We could be saying, let's get back to basics. We could be talking about so many things, but when you bring up empathy and human connection, suddenly common sense isn't that common. But I want to go back to what you said before. By the way, I didn't mention this, but just, to bring us back to a little bit of levity, I never asked you who said this. If you know who it is, I won't let you guess because there's still too much I want to talk to you about. But it was actually the chief marketing officer of Nokia on the day that the iPhone came out, René Descartes. No, I'm kidding. It really was Descartes. It was not the chief marketing officer of Nokia. But I loved how you spoke about this idea that common sense needs to be common as in shared, common as in the golden rule, common as in the things that at our core we all believe in, we all subscribe to, and at that most basic primal instinct is what keeps us alive, connected to one another and ensures our, mammalistic differentiation. And I feel that point has been driven home so strongly by you. Joey said, "This is the first time I've welled up on Corona TV." Wow. I had goosebumps watching that video. So thank you. Now, let's go from the sublime to the ridiculous, which is, here's one example. I had to bring it up, of a company that so desperately needs to buy this book and institute common sense. And of course, I'm referring to Sherwin-Williams. Do you want to set up the story quickly, and then I'll show the TikTok?
No. I want you to set up the story.
All right. So, I mean, the irony of this story, the irony is that we've all, you, I, myself, we've been writing about this for 20 years, about what happens when an employee or a customer, differentiates themselves, stands up, is creative, becomes the embodiment of the brand, and they are squashed and quashed and cease and desisted and fired. And this is what happened at Sherwin-Williams. This guy is a Jackson Pollock. He's so talented. Let me show you that TikTok.
This is how I got fired at my job as a paint mixer. Last year, I started making paint videos at the store, showing everyone how satisfying paint mixing can be, and I really enjoyed doing it. I noticed the videos were doing well and people seemed to be enjoying them on TikTok. I developed a business presentation to show the marketing department how TikTok can be beneficial to the company's brand. The VP of marketing then told me he didn't even want to see my presentation I had made for him. After that, I started purchasing my own paint and continued making the videos. A few months later, I was fired for gross misconduct because people were calling customer service and asking if they could put blueberries inside of paint. I was pretty bummed out at first, but with the support of my friends and family, I continued to do what I love. My friends were even nice enough to let me use their basement as a studio to continue filming my videos. It's been a struggle, but I've been continuing to develop my own brand and make content for people.
Recent one, Martin, a recent one, and just look at the twist, the brand twist here.
Most of you guys know my story about how I had moved to Florida to start my new job at the paint store. So here's another quick little story. I had went to T-Mobile this past weekend to get help setting up my new 5G phone. When I got there, I had met a really cool sales associate named Mark. While we were getting my phone set up, Mark and I actually made some good conversation about TikTok and some other hobbies that we enjoy. Mark had emphasized that T-Mobile was a super cool company who lets their employees stay true to themselves. And I find that super important when looking for a company to work for. Comment your favorite perk of working at T-Mobile.
It's so beautiful, that story, and it reminds me about a really interesting insight, because a lot of people are always saying to me, so who has common sense, who doesn't? Well, let me tell you a story. Two young kids were off their head one night smoking weeds. And of course, they're taking a photo of each other. They set it up on social. Mom is seeing it. She freaks out. And the guy's saying to his friend, he's saying, listen, I wish we could retract that photo, or at least destroy it. And that became the foundational story of Snapchat, as we know today, a $50 billion company, exact as what we saw here. And so what is so important about it is, in those cases, both of these people experienced empathy. They experienced the pain, and because of that, they saw a need. I tend to say it's the gap between having a need and feeling an opportunity, which is representing a new opportunity for a brand, a product, or a service. Well, that's what empathy is generating. But as a company grow bigger and the founders are moved to the side, think about Google, and as suddenly you have many layers coming in, and you have a revolving door of new staff coming in, suddenly the company want to protect themselves. And how do they do that? They put in lawyers and legal and compliance and all those good folks. What happens is slowly it loses sight of who's paying the bill. So what we have learned through the study now is that the bigger a company is, the more layers it has, and the older it is, the more it basically is a commodity, the more it lacks common sense. The reverse is what I call nonsense, and the less empathy it has. And it's basically reverse. The smaller it is, the more entrepreneurial, the more common sense, and the more it actually has common sense and empathy in a nice way. So what you should do, those of you guys listening and watching right now, is you constantly need to be in touch with who's paying your bill. Put yourself in the shoes of their lives and experience it. And once you do that, then you actually are breaking down that lack of common sense in a very systematic way.
So I want to put this on the screen, and in the comments below, I've put a link to first of all the article, the LinkedIn article that I cited earlier, The Ultimate Excuse. I've also put this one in, a terrific piece that Martin wrote called Our New Normal, Why There Is No Culture Button in Microsoft Teams. You say one thing in this, which I think is just fantastic. You say, as managers and leaders navigating our new normal, we need to be asking ourselves, how can we reinvent the sort of culture that leads our best people to decide to stay with us? You actually believe that amidst this COVID world or reality that we're living in, amidst this nonsense that has been the enemy of common sense, that companies are going to lose ground, lose employees, and lose the battle to survive and thrive, in other words, built to suck, if they cannot get a grasp on, I'll just fill it in, empathy, culture, common sense, customer connection, all of the above.
Absolutely. And what I say here is very simple. Most people have been used to having an employer paying their salary. Now that relationship was moved online, culture started to collapse. Why should I go into the office? They're closing down the office. And suddenly what happens is that now I'm saying to myself, shouldn't I have 5 different employers? Meaning I go freelance. Meaning, in fact, I have to build up my own personal brand. And when I speak to media in Asia at the moment, every time I'm noticing how the Chinese community now increasingly see themselves as individual personal brand because they don't want to be employed by just one person. And here's even the worst aspect of this. Companies now are saving a lot of money because of this. Rent is cut in half. Cleaning is no longer needed. No, the security is gone. The canteen is closed. I can go on and on and on. But what happens now as a consequence is that those money are not going over to the employees. In fact, a lot of people have to set up their own studio. They have to destroy their home life. There is no mixture between private and work. It's just one big blur. And so that's the reason why a lot of people need a lot of purpose in their life right now, because they have a pipeline of bureaucracy going straight into the bedrooms. It cannot be worse. So, dear employer, remember one thing. It may be you can channel some money to the bottom line at the moment. That's fantastic. But remember, you're selling out at the same time. You better reinvest that in the staff, or else one day there is no one behind that screen helping you anymore, because people don't want to be in an empty culture. I think people are getting that wake-up moment right now.
I love it. Top line, common sense, bottom line, nonsense. When there is a disconnect, when the two are not common, right? Maybe that's a good way to synthesize this wonderful lesson. And I love the fact that all of these cost savings, from all of the internal travel, from all of the catering, from all of this office rental space, this money should absolutely have been passed on to customers who were late in payments, or who were defaulting on payments, or employees that were struggling at home, etc. That's why the Ministry of Common Sense, that's why this book was written and rewritten, I should say, by the right person, in the right place, at the right time. Martin, it's always just a pleasure to be hanging out with you, but I would be remiss if I did not tell people how they could connect with you. Instagram, LinkedIn, find out more about Martin and the Ministry of Common Sense at martinlindstrom.com/ministry-of-common sense. And that's for the people listening on the audio podcast. But the most important thing is that people can pre-order the book, because the book isn't even out yet. The book is out in 5 days. So you are getting one of the first, I would say, previews of the book. And if you actually pre-order the book, and I'll put that link in the show notes as well, you'll be able to get an offer as well. You want to just tell us very briefly about the offer, because I know that this is someone very, very important to you, Marshall Goldsmith.
Yeah, absolutely. Marshall Goldsmith is I would say my mentor, and certainly a person which, as you know, he has developed a range of different concepts around business coaching, and basically is the one inventing the very term. Marshall has set up a community of top coaches and business folks from around the world. And together we have created what's called a masterclass, which is also called Off Methods. There you have tens of high quality people from around the world sharing their best experiences from running businesses and being strong leaders or transforming organizations or building cultures. And I'm going to give everyone free of charge access to this for 1 month. And there is thousands of hours of content, and bundle it with my new book. So if you are interested in this topic, you can buy the book. You'll get free access to this event for a whole month. And you can learn a lot from these amazing people, in particular from Marshall Goldsmith and all the wonderful colleagues I have in this network. So thanks to Marshall Goldsmith for this gift. And hopefully all of us can get rid of this lack of common sense now, because the world really needs it, I tell you.
I'm telling you, there's one more thing to do, or I guess two more things. One is to let people know, if you would like to hang out with Martin before he goes on his worldwide virtual tour that hopefully does not include touching pens, smelling coffee that he can't get hold of, waiting in line at the back of the aircraft as he goes on his worldwide tour to promote this book, you can come and hang out with us at our wonderful Zoom after show. That's bit.ly/CoronaTV after show. But Martin, the Corona question for you to end the show: what business person or leader is one person you will be watching in 2021? And I will just caveat that by saying two things. One is that I'm sure that this person embodies the principles of common sense, no doubt. And number two, I'm sure if I asked many people this question, they would probably say you are one to watch. But we're going to reverse roles and ask you who you're looking out for in 2021.
Well, thank you for your flattering words here. Jeff Kirchner is the one I would select here for the moment. Jeff has started up a company called Literally, which is a new company where they are mapping down waste of plastic across the world. And what they literally are doing is they're mapping down where is most waste thrown on the street, in the parks, at the sea, and they're then allocating a whole army of people going up, cleaning up this stuff. And Jeff, I just met him recently, a pretty unique guy, and I would say he's the one to watch for two reasons. One is he's adding common sense to a big problem which needs it, and second, he has the courage to throw his entire job out from TBWA and basically just save the planet. And people which are doing that, you know what? I can only have respect for them.
Sounds like common sense to me. Martin, good luck with the tour. It's always just, I just see your face and I smile. And you know what else?
Thank you.
You know who else smiles? Chuck Norris, because he has this to say about your appearance today.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
There you go. I'll see you guys tomorrow for Corona Community. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for watching Corona TV with your host, multiple author and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. Corona TV is the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing. The after show on Zoom starts right now at bit.ly/Corona TV After Show. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show at CoronaTV.show. And if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, text Corona TV to 66866 or visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.